This is a fictional mindbender. So there's been a show on, which I've considered an underrated classic, criminally in my opinion, called Warrior, which is a martial arts series that is set in San Francisco during the 1870s, as well as being based on a story concept from Bruce Lee himself. And the show also gives stunning fight sequences as well as sets, and becomes something of a microcosm of the mindset of much of America during that time period as well, being set between post-Civil War and the industrial period, as well as glimpsing it through not only the eyes of the Chinese immigrants coming into San Francisco, but also other populations and classes as well that live in the city: rich, poor, Irish, black, gay, and of course the Chinese. So, naturally, as one might expect, Warrior is being immersed within the soup of 19th century American racism. However, this is where the genius of the writers tends to shine. Where most shows and movies depict this era as something of a one-note morality sermon, introduce and follow the protagonists around, show the evils of racism, watch said protagonists become heroes or anti-heroes against the system, and then have the evils change their ways through showing them the error of what they're doing, and they repent. However, Warrior does not take that route. Rather, Warrior, while still taking a hard stance on the evils of racism, also shows just how complicated and nuanced it actually was back then. More so than what many Americans today, I think, give it credit for. And no scene best encapsulates this messy business than four particular scenes between the Chinese protagonist, Assam, and the leader of the San Francisco Irish community and racist, Dan Leary. Their first meeting occurs as one might expect of a typical martial arts hero film, with Assam working in a coal factory who's, because he's on the outs with his gang, meets Leary during a fight when he leads some Irish thugs in a raid on the factory and start breaking the fingers of Chinese workers there so they can't work anymore and thereby extort the factory owner. It's a brutal scene until Assam of course steps in and starts kicking the thugs' asses before Leary then shows up with a classic Superman punch. The mini boss fight is then cut short, but both warriors clearly establish themselves as being alphas. The next meeting occurs sometime later with Assam now back with his Tong gang, and guarding a factory that they made an alliance with to protect them from the Irish. He runs into Leary and some of his gang, and the two basically have a good old-fashioned face-off, with both of them talking shit about each other before it gets real. Leary recognizes Assam from their first fight, and casually insults him with a racist slang before stating matter-of-factly that the Chinese will never be American nor belong there, no matter how far they climb up the social ladder or how much they dress and adapt to society, and that they are a threat to the Irish community because of the jobs that they're stealing from them. Assam, of course, just casually retorts that if the Irish were so American, then Leary should ask why their own keeps fucking them over to hire non-Americans. And then, to add insult to injury, throws Leary's insult back at him by saying that maybe it's the Irish who don't belong if they're being treated as such. The fight almost breaks out, but Leary then thinks better of it for the moment and gets Assam's name, no longer referring to him as a slur, but letting him know that the beef between them was now personal. The third meeting happens after the Chinatown riots by the Irish, where many Chinese and Irish are killed in the fighting. Assam, deciding for the moment to be the hero, literally strolls in through the front door of Leary's bar and asks for a drink. Moments later, Leary arrives to the site of his rival sitting at a table casually, trying to have a drink, with the bodies of some beat-up Irishmen at his feet and the rest keeping a cautionary distance. It's clear that both of them want to fight, but they decide to have a drink first and talk. This time, the two men talk about the struggles of their communities in America, which of course has opportunity, which they both want, but also takes advantage of them as well. Assam throws up the same jibe as before about the Irish not belonging, before Leary this time angrily shooting back that his people had bled for America while the Chinese had not. despite the common ground they both have, the fight was inevitable, and eventually the two walk out and have a brutal battle in which Assam emerges the victor. The last meeting occurs later on, with Leary this time walking into Chinatown alone. It's a huge set of balls if there ever was one, given the fact about the history of the riots, and that Assam, after beating Leary in front of his own people, told both of them basically to stay out of Chinatown. However, this time there is no physical altercation, and with the conclusion of this particular truce, both men seem to be recognized as the unspoken alphas of their communities. So as I said, the show addresses racism not just through a moral lens, but a human and economic lens as well. Unlike some of the more well-off citizens of San Francisco, the Irish don't hate the Chinese because they're Chinese, but rather because the businessmen who don't care for either groups are hiring Chinese because they will work for less, leaving the Irish and their families without jobs and pretty much left to swallow. Moreover, according to Leary, the Irish had already died for the country and shed blood for it, and thus had earned by that same blood the right to be called Americans, which is basically an answer to Assam's claim that the Irish aren't Americans either. I had to look it up to get some more detail about it as to why he was saying that, but what I found was that essentially he's referring to the American Civil War, where many who fought in it were in fact Irish, including Leary himself apparently. Leary also establishes that his racism is even more nuanced because, while he hates the Chinese for taking Irish jobs, he also defends two black men who enter his bar to get a drink and who are about to be attacked by Irishmen, and then chastises them in the same moment for being dumb enough to come into an Irish bar in the first place. Not only that, Leary twice acknowledges Assam individually, once by name rather than referring to him as a group slur. And don't get it twisted, they both still hate each other's guts, and they make that clear as well. But, essentially, that Warrior seems to say that racism and injustice in San Francisco, and arguably by extension America, is top down. Poor and suffering communities are in violent competition with each other and within themselves to survive in a society that primarily is basically capitalism ran off the rails. The Irish hate the Chinese and the blacks, the Chinese hate the Irish and the blacks hate the Irish and don't trust the Chinese. Nobody likes nobody in this scenario. And on top of that, the drug dealers don't care about any of these groups. They only care about who can complete their industrial projects with the least cost to themselves. And if that means fueling some malcontent within the lower echelons, then so be it. And again, Warrior is not trying to justify racism by any means. Something I think needs to be said repeatedly because of how many people today are afraid of the possibility of giving 1 inch of rational ground, meaning irrationally giving a mile. But that the roots of those injustices, and that arguably continue to this day, lie in more than just the color of one's skin. But what do you guys think? Have you seen the show Warrior at all? And if you have, do you agree with this conclusion? Or do you think that the portrayal of racism in 1870 San Francisco was wrong, and that it is just as simple as it seems? Let me know in the comments below, but otherwise, this is the Fictional Mindbender, and you guys have a good day.